Am I the villain for criticizing the name my cousin chose for her baby and possibly ruining her excitement? It feels like a delicate situation, but let me explain. Stephanie and I aren't just cousins, we're more like best friends, and it's been that way for years. She's not really online, so she's out of the loop on certain memes, jokes, and viral moments. Honestly, she doesn't quite get how the internet works, especially the whole viral meme culture. It's a major thing that plays into this, so stick with me. Stephanie is pregnant, and she just found out she's having a girl. A week ago, she excitedly told a gathering of her closest friends that she's naming her daughter Karen. The moment those words left her lips, the air shifted. The room fell dead silent. It was almost as if the temperature dropped. After what seemed like an eternity, everyone murmured polite responses, "That's a lovely name." But I couldn't bring myself to say anything. I was caught off guard, feeling the weight of it but unsure how to address it. Later, when Stephanie stepped out of the room, everyone started whispering, horrified. "That poor kid," one of them muttered, while another chimed in, "Why Karen of all names?" I couldn't help but feel uncomfortable with the conversation. Here they were, being so kind to her face, but as soon as she left, they turned. The hypocrisy stung. Over the next couple of days, I couldn't shake the feeling. The name just seemed loaded. It felt like it could harm the baby, and Stephanie had no idea about the online context tied to it. She had no way of making an informed decision. So, after thinking it over, I decided to bring it up. I started carefully, telling her how thrilled I was for her, how much I loved the idea of being an aunt, and how I just wanted to make sure she had all the facts before settling on a name. Then, I started to explain that the name Karen had taken on some negative connotations. It's now a meme used to describe an entitled, often rude middle-aged woman. I wasn't trying to insult her choice, I just thought she should know. Stephanie's reaction was immediate and sharp. She cut me off, almost yelling, "Why are you saying this? This is so mean." I froze, completely caught off guard. This was so out of character for her. Her voice was filled with confusion and frustration. I tried to backpedal quickly, saying, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just thought you should know." But she didn't stop. She said, "That's the name I picked for my daughter. Do you think I picked it as a joke?" Her words were like a punch to the gut. It was clear she didn't understand what I was trying to explain. So, with my heart racing and the tension mounting, I decided to push a little more. Maybe she'd see where I was coming from. I grabbed my phone, Googled Karen Know Your Meme, and turned the screen toward her, trying to show her the viral memes and explain how it all worked. "Look, I'm just saying there's more to the name than you might realize," I pleaded. But she wasn't having it. She stood up, slapped my phone away, and shouted, "Wow." Then she stormed out, driving off without another word. The fallout was immediate. My aunt and mom have been on my case all week. Stephanie told them I made fun of her baby name, and now I feel like the villain. She hasn't spoken to me or answered my texts since that night. I'm not one to force a conversation when someone's clearly upset, but I can't help but question if I was wrong for bringing it up in the first place. Was I too blunt? Was I being too critical? After reading through the feedback, it seems like I got the judgment I deserved. I wasn't trying to hurt her, I just wanted her to know what she might be walking into with this name. Stephanie and I have always been incredibly open and honest with each other. I was her maid of honor at her wedding. We even joked as teens about how I would be the one to talk her out of the marriage if the groom wasn't good enough. So maybe that history made me too casual in how I brought it up. Maybe I underestimated how attached she already was to the name, and that made my approach unfeeling. I've apologized, and I think she's accepted it, but I can't help but feel a bit frustrated. Stephanie still thinks I was just making fun of her decision. She still believes I was mocking her choice, but I swear that wasn't my intent. I messaged her a heartfelt apology, and though I won't bring it up again, I want to make it clear that I wasn't trying to talk her out of the name, I just didn't want her to be blindsided. If it came up later, I didn't want her to be shocked by the association. Stephanie and her husband have an arrangement with their baby names. She picks the girl names, and he picks the boy names. They both have veto power over the other's choices. He's okay with Karen, and neither of them is particularly into the internet or tech savvy. They're in their late 20s, and though they're a bit behind the curve on online culture, it doesn't make them bad people. I understand that now, and I realize I should have been more sensitive about how I presented the information. Now, with Karen born happy and healthy back in October, everything feels different. I've spent time with her, even though I wasn't able to see her much earlier in the year. When I hold her, Karen just means her, it's her name, and I don't think about the negative memes. The associations are gone, at least for me. But there's more to the story. Stephanie, after reconnecting with Facebook during the pandemic, has now seen all the Karen memes for the first time. And let's just say, she's not impressed. She's found them confusing and a little disturbing. It's like she's finally discovering the weight of the name, and she's struggling with it. And now, I'm wondering, did I set this whole thing in motion? Could I have avoided all of this? Or was this just going to happen anyway? The memes and connotations were always going to find their way to her, sooner or later. I just wish I could have handled it better. I decided not to get into the whole Karen thing with Stephanie again. It had gone so badly last time, and both my mom and her mom kept bringing it up. They were upset about how it had affected Stephanie, asking why I hadn't explained it better, why I didn't tell her sooner, and why I hadn't just been upfront about it. Honestly, you can't win in situations like that, no matter how hard you try. So, thank you, everyone, for all your support on my last post. It really helped me calm down and see the situation with a bit more peace of mind. Wow, I've been completely overwhelmed by the sheer number of thoughtful, kind PMs and comments I've received. It's heartwarming to see so many empathetic people around, especially in a community that focuses on such a challenging topic. But, of course, there were also a few negative ones, as you'd expect. Thank you, again, to everyone who reached out. It constantly amazes me how much kindness exists in spaces like these. Just to clarify for context, Stephanie was pretty chill about everything at first. She'd seen some posts about that whole Central Park Karen incident, you know, the one with the white lady harassing the black birdwatcher. She asked me, point blank, why everyone was calling that woman Karen when her actual name was Amy. She's often asked me to help her navigate internet culture like that, sort of like an online interpreter, as she put it. I immediately told her, no way, I'm not talking about this with you again. The last time we tried, it went horribly, and I wasn't going to put myself through that again. I think that was the first time she really understood where I was coming from, though, and after that, she didn't bring it up again. Now, as for my mom and aunt, they're a lot. They tend to get ridiculously worked up about whatever is happening at the moment, especially if it's something that's causing drama. If there's any conflict, they get way too involved, trying to fix everything. Stephanie's been venting to her mom, not about me, but about how upset the memes make her. And of course, my mom and aunt are now making it seem like this whole situation is my fault. I love them dearly, but sometimes reasoning with them is like trying to nail jelly to a wall. As for Stephanie, I don't blame her at all. She's just really upset and confused, but she hasn't turned it into my problem. My mom and aunt, though, they love a bit of drama. They're making mountains out of molehills, as usual. When it comes to criticism from my family, it's easier to just wait for them to forget about it and move on to something else. They've got a knack for it. Someone in the comments mentioned that they thought I was the one in the wrong for raising concerns with the name for selfish reasons. Looking back, I can see how I wasn't entirely clear about my discomfort in my original post. The issue wasn't just the name itself, but how the whole situation unfolded in our friend group. I spent a couple of days feeling off after Stephanie's announcement, not just because of the name, but because of what our friends had said. They'd praised the name to her face, but behind her back, they made snide comments. I couldn't call them out in the moment, and that ate at me for days. I didn't want to tell Stephanie what they'd said because it felt like gossip, and I didn't want to stir up any more conflict. But raising the issue with her seemed like a reasonable compromise. I wrestled with it internally, and clearly, I didn't handle it well. One commenter asked if I understood the difference between being upset with my friends for their response and actually confronting Stephanie about her name choice. They're two different things, right? Well, no. I didn't bring up the topic with Stephanie to scold anyone. I did it because I felt like, if they were going to talk behind her back, they owed it to her to say it to her face. Ultimately, I thought Stephanie deserved to know what was being said, and I wanted her to have that information, whatever she decided to do with it. I have a lot of history with Stephanie. We've always been brutally honest with each other, from the silly stuff, like telling each other when outfits don't look right, to the harder conversations, like the time she told me, point blank, that a close friend of mine had been treating me terribly and that I needed to end the friendship. We've always been like that. So when it came to this, I honestly thought it was the right move, even though it ultimately didn't go as planned. Now, for the update. I've gotten a few PMs over the years asking for updates, so since we just celebrated Karen's 3rd birthday, I thought I'd give you all a little check-in. First off, baby Karen, well, not so much a baby anymore, is doing wonderfully. She's hitting all her developmental milestones, and she's sharp as a tack. Some of the things she says are full-on sentences, and it melts my heart every time. It feels like just yesterday, Stephanie was pregnant, and now Karen's already a little person with her own thoughts and ideas. She loves books, and you can tell she's got an incredibly curious mind. I'm convinced she's going to grow up to be an actual genius. But, unfortunately, when Karen started daycare this year, things got a little tricky. The older kids, especially some of the 5-year-olds, picked up on the negative connotations of her name. They started making fun of her, and that kind of thing can be brutal at that age. Karen was too young to understand, but she could sense that something was off, and it upset her. The daycare staff immediately stepped in, but after a month of trying to shut it down without success, Stephanie and her husband decided to change her name to Carrie. It was already a nickname they'd been using, and Karen recognized it as her own. Stephanie and I hadn't really talked about the name situation since the pregnancy, but when she told me what was happening in daycare, she apologized. I reassured her that there was no need to apologize. I know emotions get messy when you're pregnant, and I honestly thought Carrie was a great solution. It's hard to adjust to a new name, but I think it's for the best. What bums me out is how some people online are gleeful about the situation. They find it funny, but I'd much rather live in a world where the name Karen didn't have the baggage it does. I wish I could take back all the negative things people associate with that name, especially when it comes to this sweet, loving, brilliant little girl. Karen, sorry, Carrie, is everything good in the world, and she deserves to have every good thing life has to offer. I also want to clear something up from my last post. A lot of people didn't like Stephanie, and I get it. The post was a snapshot of a very emotionally charged time in her life. She's an amazing lifelong friend, and I'd do anything for her. She's been there for me during some of my hardest times. And yes, I could have handled the name conversation better, but in hindsight, I'm glad I brought it up. I feel like I owed her that honesty. The only thing I'd change is that I would have approached it more gently. It all started with a conversation I had with Stephanie, where I thought I could finally clear the air, especially after dealing with the awkwardness surrounding Carrie's name. There were some bumps in the road, like how other kids reacted to it, but in the grand scheme of things, it's probably better to address it now, when Carrie doesn't fully grasp the situation. Can you imagine if this went unnoticed and followed her all the way to kindergarten or elementary school? That's when the full brunt of bullying could have come crashing down. But the silver lining? Carrie's adjusting so well to her nickname. She's even embraced it as her new identity, and now, Stephanie and her husband are planning to enroll her under Carrie as her official name in school. The best part? In schools around here, they prioritize preferred names over legal names for things like classroom roll calls, which means Carrie might go all the way through K-12 without her classmates ever finding out her legal name is Karen. How incredible would that be? But here's the thing, though, I can't help but hope that this whole Karen trend dies down soon. The last thing any of us needs is that association haunting her for years to come. Recently, I received some truly nasty messages, direct and aimed at Carrie. Can you believe it? People wishing harm on an innocent child, calling her names and all sorts of terrible things. I mean, she's just a kid. It's so disheartening. To clarify, the boys at daycare didn't even know Karen was a real name. The only way they heard it used was in a derogatory context at home, so they thought it was just a joke, like calling someone fart face. That's why they found it so funny. In their little world, meeting a Karen seemed no different than meeting someone named something equally silly. But when the daycare staff explained that Karen was an actual name, things shifted. They tried their best to keep the teasing under control, but it wasn't until we made the decision to officially change Carrie's name that things started to calm down. Time passed, and now, the daycare kids call her Carrie without missing a beat. The storm passed, and the kids have thankfully moved on. And while I'm at it, let me address something. There's no need to go after the Reddit users who judged me harshly for my original post. They gave their honest opinion in an online space designed for it. I wasn't looking for advice, I was seeking judgment, real feedback, made in good faith. The judgment came, and it's over. Let's leave it there. As for Stephanie, some people had criticized her for being a bad friend, and I just have to say, she's been one of the best friends anyone could ask for. Let me share a little bit about her. She's the kind of friend who, when I had a minor car accident in a city where I had no one, dropped everything and drove 300 miles to be there for me. She once gave me $1,500, no questions asked, when I was broke and needed to escape a bad living situation. She stood up for me, no matter what. When I was a teenager, and the boy she had a crush on made fun of me for something I was deeply sensitive about, she didn't just keep quiet, she told him off. Then, she led me away to comfort me. That's the kind of person she is. This post only shows a tiny part of who she is, and it's really important to keep that in mind when reading through all this. When I first raised my concerns about the situation, Stephanie was dealing with a lot. She was very pregnant, emotional, sleep-deprived, and just struggling with hormones. Her reaction, as harsh as it seemed to me at the time, was rooted in confusion rather than malice. And I get that now. Fast forward to last month, and Carrie is now legally Caroline with her new birth certificate and all. The bullying at daycare had already settled down after Stephanie and her husband started calling her Carrie, but now, this name change meant that the Karen issue wouldn't follow her to school. That's a huge relief. Stephanie and her husband had been dealing with constant, awkward reactions from people whenever they had to use Karen's legal name. Adults even looked at them with side eyes or made snarky comments. The breaking point came at the airport. Can you picture it? They were heading out to visit Stephanie's in-laws with Carrie, and the TSA agent made a rude comment. Later, when they were talking to the gate agent about their seats, the agent laughed out loud at Carrie's ticket, showed it to the other agent, and they both scoffed at her. Poor kid, one of them said, ignoring Stephanie and her husband entirely. And this all happened right in front of Carrie. That moment was a turning point for Stephanie and her husband, and once they got home, they immediately started the name change process. To their surprise, it was incredibly easy, just $30, and the change was official. Carrie's a happy, social little girl, and it's hard to say whether those past experiences left a mark on her. I truly hope they didn't, but she's still as confident and outgoing as ever, which gives me hope. Stephanie and we've talked about all of this, especially that awkward conversation we had in October, and while it wasn't easy, it helped us move forward. Stephanie's apologized multiple times for her initial reaction, and I've admitted I didn't handle things very well either. We've both been working through our own issues, especially with our families. To give some context, our grandparents were nightmares. Our grandfather was a domineering preacher, physically abusive, and our grandmother, a narcissist, manipulated our mom and aunt through their entire childhood. That trauma bonded them, making them anxious and reactive adults. Any little conflict sends them into a tailspin. As a result, Stephanie and I have been learning to set better boundaries with that generation. I've been in therapy for a couple of years now, and Stephanie joined me last year. We've both come to understand how our grandparents' abuse impacted our moms and, in turn, affected us. We're determined to break the cycle, especially when it comes to Carrie. She won't have to carry the weight of that legacy. Finally, I want to thank everyone for their kind messages, whether here, on my profile posts, or in the updates I've shared. Your words have meant so much, even if I haven't always had the chance to reply. For those still critical of Stephanie, I want to emphasize that her initial reaction was completely out of character. She was just overwhelmed, and it's been wonderful to see her grow through it. Stephanie is the most loyal, caring friend I've ever had, and I know this is just a small glimpse into our dynamic. Now, as we've discussed everything, I'm optimistic about where we're headed. I don't expect any more updates, but thanks for following our journey these past few years.